Yeah, our Sabbath seminars, from which you Adventists today um, got birth, the leaders of that group met with the leaders of the University Church here at Loma Linda on on Wednesday, just what 4 days ago, and because our class is a open and affirming class publicly, and and the university church leadership wants to keep, for good pastoral reasons, keep the congregation together, and so the purpose of that meeting was to have a have a care strengthen our communication with one another.
Are they still holding off? Is Randy still holding off on being open and affirming?
Um, uh, the short answer is yes, but it's not a black and white issue. There is an incremental process underway, and it involves a task force which has been meeting for the last year or so on this topic, and how to bring that forward to the congregation. It's a very deliberative process. The university church has almost 7,000 members, so it's like a little conference. So, you know, and Randy has a pastoral. He's very pastoral. Has a chaplaincy background professionally, as you might know, and he very much wants to keep the congregation together, and it's a very diverse congregation.
Well, I'm really looking forward to this. Lauren, can I have a word at the beginning?
You can, of course.
Thank you, thank you. Would that be now or later?
Hold on just a moment here. Let's
I was
have
just listening
Chris
to you,
go
Jim.
ahead and start the meeting.
Hello, everybody. Chris Widmer coming to you from Cohutta, Georgia, instead of Northern California, where I usually am, but good to be here. And let's start with a word of prayer. Would you join me? Mighty God, thank you for this opportunity of meeting electronically and meeting in the Spirit, which is everywhere. Thank you for the presence of Jesus through the Spirit in our homes, in our offices, and wherever we find ourselves today. Bless us, Lord, as we ponder today the topic that is frequently in our church boards and school boards, and it's not a topic, it's really just about our family members. And so as we talk about how to love our church family members, we pray that you will help us with that today, and that you'll bless Dr. Walters as he shares with us today. Thank you in a special way. We pray in thy name. Amen.
So let's give Bjorn Karlman the first chance, please, and then we'll go to Dr. Walters.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone. And thank you in advance, Dr. Walters, for this presentation. This is
And it's Bjorn. It's Jim. The doctor stuff. We've heard enough of that already.
Well, as a friend, I know you as Jim, but we often, yeah, okay. Well, as you wish. Well, when Jim was talking about the size of the Loma Linda Church being like a small conference, try a small union, like the Swedish Union. I was just in Sweden at an Adventist event. It's about 3,000 members, so that kind of puts things in perspective. And guys, the mere fact that we can have this discussion as openly and as generously as I know we're going to have it today is because we can have a platform like Adventists Today that is able to do that without being shut down, with a call up to the third floor of the GC building. So thank you for supporting our spring fundraiser, which is going on right now. It's vital. We're also hiring a managing editor, which is a huge step for us, growing our team, making us more sustainable, more future-proof, growing us for the future. So if you haven't had a chance to support us yet in the spring fundraiser, I am going to post the link for you. And thank you for backing us. It means a lot. It means that we can have ATSS, we can have Adventists Today, and make a really positive, generous, loving contribution to this Adventist church that we love and support. So thank you in advance, and I look forward to this discussion and presentation.
Thank you very much. We're going to get started. First, I'm just going to kind of quickly review the guidelines that we have here for each other in our class. We always try to be courteous and respectful in speech and in the chat, and also with the emojis that are available down below in the React button if you have that. We ask you that you stick to the topic during questions and comments, and keep them brief as possible so as many people can be involved. And you will be muted until asked to unmute. And near the end of the presentation, go ahead and raise your hand, an electronic hand that puts you in a queue, and we'll call on you then. And use your real name. You could type in your location as well. And we are glad that each of you are here today, and more will be arriving. And with that, we just want to welcome Jim. Thank you for presentation today, and let's begin.
Okay, Chris, very good. A couple of points. First of all, some people think that Adventist Today is sort of beyond the pale, so progressive, but I want to point out that Bjorn Karlman just gave a fervent offering appeal, and that is quite traditional in our churches.
I'll pass the plate later.
The second thing I wonder, Chris, is if you can get an indication, however you might do this, from your congregates as to how many have read the piece that this is based on, this presentation that Lauren ran this last week in Adventist Today. Because if I can get a sense of how many have read it, I will stay closer to what was said there, or veer away from reading some of the high points.
Well, we have 93 people. Go ahead,
I
Lauren.
think you can safely, I think you can safely assume that even if we've read it, we wouldn't mind hearing it again, because probably a lot of people haven't. So I've read it, but not everybody has.
I'm seeing some thumbs up from people, so I think people are indicating that they have read it. I read it earlier this week and before I left home, I think, on my trip. So yeah, I think you're among people who would like to hear it again, though, and summarized. And I just looked up what the word plight means, so I can chime in on that later.
Well, and also I noticed that Lauren, he didn't use what I thought was the most poignant phrase, soul trauma. In fact, that got the attention of one of the editors of religion journals, who contacted me when she read that in the program for the American Academy of Religion and the Society of Biblical Literature, which met, that those two associations they have a meeting every year, an annual meeting, and about 10,000 people go to that meeting, and the Adventists tag along through their ASRS, Adventist Society of Religious Studies. And I gave the paper there that this is based on, and used that term soul trauma, and that caught her attention. But but that's just an aside. Okay, so I will dive in. I've got 10 slides, and I think I'll take probably about 30 minutes, and that will leave plenty of time for us to have dialogue. And I'm particularly appreciative of dialogue, but I think that for me to give a coherent presentation to put something before you is appropriate, and it's working out well. Lauren and I agreed that I would give the presentation today, and that before I gave it, he would publish this piece, and so here we go. Okay, so the story is about Bob. How much longer should Bob continue his personal agony to remain a faithful Adventist? Bob is a 21-year-old gay church member who has fought to live straight for the last 10 years. Bob's existential dilemma has two elements. First, his attempt to remain Adventist and retain his admittedly unsteady salvation. And the second thing is his temptation, his desire to live more openly as a gay man that he knows himself to be, quite regardless of the consequences. He's endured years of agonizing prayer, study, and counseling. And recently, Bob has largely come to terms. Here, let me advance my slides by. There we go. Recently, Bob has largely come to terms with his non-heteronormative identity, but still he's plagued with a sense of residual sinfulness, shame, and guilt. And last month, he came out to his helpful therapist and to a couple of close friends, but not to his family or his church youth group. He's long had a sense of unworthiness. If his friends knew his sexual orientation, the anticipated social isolation that he senses, even if it's unintended, it would surely erode his already shaking self-esteem. And if his mental health slipped further, sleeplessness would increase, and he fears that residual, that suicidal ideation would again raise its deadly head. And I should say that although I am not homosexual myself, but I've tried, I have, like so many of you, have homosexual friends, LGBTQI friends. I wanted to get it right. And so there is a board member of Adventists Today who is a very thoughtful, 30-something member of the board who I have gotten to know, and I ran this by him, and he made some suggestions. He tweaked some terms, some understandings, and so it's better than it was originally, but he thought that I got it pretty well to begin with. But I just wanted you to know that I believe this is pretty realistic in portraying Bob. Okay, so so that's the situation of Bob, and Bob's trauma that I've just described that he lives with was only deepened when his online search for resources about himself and his Adventism. When he was on that search, he came up with two official Adventist statements. The first one is from 1987, and it was voted, like the second one that I will come to, it was voted by the highest tier of of administration governance in the Adventist Church. That is an executive committee. As you may know, it is composed of GC leaders plus union conference presidents, the powerful union conference presidents from around the world. And in 1987, it voted a statement which has these elements that I just mentioned. I'll read the statement as it reads in a key sentence. Sexual abuse of spouses, comma, sexual abuse of children, comma, incest, comma, homosexual practices, in parenthesis, gay and lesbian, close parenthesis, comma, and bestiality are among the obvious perversions of God's original plan. So you can see how this could make an impact on a sensitive soul like Bob, to see that God's original plan excludes these categories and it puts homosexual practices right in there parallel to these other so-called sins. Okay, let's go to the next slide. This is similarly from the executive committee, and this is after 2 years of the Ted Wilson administration. And this is a statement on homosexuality. And key sentences in that are, quote, homosexuality is a manifestation of the disturbance and brokenness in human inclinations and relations caused by the entrance of sin into the world. While everyone is subject to fallen human nature, we also believe that by God's grace and through the encouragement of the community of faith, an individual may live in harmony with the principles of God's word. God's word that transcends time and culture does not permit a homosexual lifestyle. So in sum, these statements say that Bob's intrinsic nature, it's one that he had intuitively sensed since he was a kid, is a product of Edenic original sin. Also, it says that his gender, his sexual identity is condemned by the culture-free, time-defying Word of God. I find that to be particularly noteworthy, that we see that what you read in the Bible, and we'll be coming back to this when I cite a passage from the Hayes, Christopher Hayes, and his son's book, The Widening of God's Mercy, because they disagree with this, and they're leading evangelical thinkers. But Ted Wilson and company see the Word of God as culture-free. I think that has to do with his notion of headship theology, which is not from a ancient culture or any culture. It's transcultural. It's eternal. Men are to be in control as a part of the divine plan that is forever. Okay, let me go to the next slide, and that is that tragically, Bob, bright, sensitive, and by nature religious, is the personification of church-induced soul trauma. Okay, moving on. Let's talk about Bob being in the middle of the Gen Z. These are individuals who are from 1415 up to 2930. They were born between, according to Pew, 1997 and 2012. Bob knows that he is one out of 5 of his generation who are non-binary. And Bob, like so many of his Gen Z cohorts, has high social anxiety. It's not just him. And Bob senses that many of his peers are more spiritual than religious. The current percentage of Gen Z who self-identify as LGBTQ plus is about 17% in Europe and 22% in the United States. So basically 1 out of 5 in the Western world. The best polls show that 70% of Gen Z believe that LGBTQ plus persons are morally acceptable. Okay, moving on. This introduces what Richard Hart, he is currently the LLU president, what he said in a statement of 9 years ago. And you may have read that the board has just announced here at Loma Linda that Anthony Hilliard, an MD, will be taking Dick's place when Dick steps back. I think it's at the end of June of this year. But hopefully Anthony Hilliard will be able to continue the sort of progressive leadership that Dick Hart has shown in so many regards. It's not an unblemished progressive record, but it is quite solid as what he said to the whole university in his fortnightly notes from the president back in 2017. So I say in the article that that Bob is a bit encouraged when an online search further digs up some Loma Linda information. Although he's a bit suspicious, as his parents have long warned him about those California Adventists, Bob found that none other than the president of this institution, Loma Linda, the leading medical institution of his denomination, has written what I have here before you. He wrote to his thousands of students, faculty, and staff. Some approaching 20,000 people, I think, get this thing, at least maybe 15,000 back 9 years ago. But Hart was unabashed in what he said. When I know Dick personally, and I have talked to him about this, and he said that, well, he and Ted Wilson have just chosen to disagree on this because they have diametrically opposing views. Okay, the 1917 statement says, let's just read it. It is critical that we understand, treat, and support everyone we encounter, regardless of their hereditary, cultivated, assigned, or self-assumed sexual identity. That is what we do as health professionals. It is what our code of conduct expects of us. Further, my own interactions suggest that most LGBT individuals are not trying to stand out or fly a flag. They are longing to be accepted as part of the community, of the human race and community they find themselves in. Christ himself spent his time on earth reaching out to individuals who were marginalized during his day. While the Bible doesn't give us a specific story about Jesus relating to an LGBT person, individuals under this umbrella would certainly fit into his lexicon of those deserving his compassion and care. So as I say, that was encouraging to Bob, and we'll end with a reference to Bob and Loma Linda in a moment. But let me first say that Bob found further encouragement when his online search led him to discover a 2024 book that was about 2 years ago. It was published by Yale Press. I'll hold it up. The Widening of God's Mercy. And the subtitle is Sexuality Within the Biblical Story. Richard Hayes, who just recently, a year ago or so, passed away, but Richard Hayes, likely the leading theologically conservative biblical scholar teaching at Duke University, leading conservative biblical scholar in the country, that he had radically changed his mind about the Bible on same-sex marriage. Now, you need to contrast this current book that I just held up with a very influential, more influential, I would think, book that he had published back in 1996, called The Moral Vision of the New Testament. And in that book, which he wrote solo, the second one he did with his son, who teaches theology at Fuller Theological Seminary here in Pasadena. But that former one was very influential, and it solidified churches like the Adventist Church and other conservative churches in their stance against LGBTQ persons. Here's a key statement from that book, and it's on page 400. We must affirm that the New Testament tells us the truth about ourselves as sinners and as God's sexual creatures, : marriage between man and woman is the normative form for human sexual fulfillment, and homosexuality is one among many tragic signs that we are a broken people, alienated from God's loving purpose. Period. So that is the clarity that they had back in that Richard Hayes has had that he had in 1996. But then 3 years ago, the world of biblical interpretation, particularly the conservative world, was jolted to some degree by Richard Hayes publishing this book, The Widening of God's Mercy. And in his new book, he admits, I have come to understand that I was wrong. Let me see, do I have that on this slide here? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. The middle quote there, he says, I have come to think that I was wrong. And Hayes now says that he was not wrong in his earlier textual exegesis. He still contends that the Bible has a few, quote, emphatic and most importantly, Hayes now reads, the whole Bible with this expanded vision. It's one that sees a larger merciful God with an ever-increasing circle of acceptance. He refers to now taking a deep reading of Scripture that portrays a God whose mercy is ever widening to include the widow, sojourner, foreigner, slave, eunuch, Gentile, and now the LGBTQ plus person whom we know, and Paul couldn't possibly have known, is largely hardwired to be as they are. So that's what Hayes and his son are now saying. I think this is in the article, but it's not here in a slide, that I say that the father-son team follows in this recent book that they follow Karl Barth, the Swiss-German theologian, neo-Orthodox theologian of the last century. And they quote him as making a distinction between, get this, what the apostles and prophets said. So that's one thing. Quote, what the apostles and prophets said, past tense. And this is the other quote, what we must say on the basis of what the apostles and prophets said. So the contrast with what the apostles and prophets said and what we must say on the basis of what they said. That I think is a key distinction, and I hope that some of you are sufficiently interested that we can come back to that, because the literalism that we Adventists are steeped in is so deeply ingrained in us. I've just been reminded of that because of conversations I'm having with another thinker in our denomination, whom I am surprised doesn't get the importance of this distinction between following what the apostles and prophets said and what we must say / think on the basis of what they said long ago. But I hope we can come back to that. Okay, just about to wrap up here. Okay. So one question is whether Ellen White, if she were with us, would possibly concur with this shift in Richard Hayes' thinking from 1996 to 2024. Our friend Bob is steeped in a literalist reading of the Bible, as so many of us are, and also in a literalist reading of Ellen White's writings. Yet, as deep-seated as literalism is in Adventism, there is another side to Adventism. Indeed, on one reading, it's Ellen White's own understanding that divine truth is dynamic and ever evolving. And so here are a couple of passages, and these are different from the two passages that were in the early version of what was in the Adventist Today article, because it was pointed out to me that the earlier quotes were not accurate, and these are, let no one come to the conclusion that there is no more truth to be revealed. I think that's how that works. And then you can read that other one, because I can't read that whole caption.
I can read it for you. Those
Yeah,
who
why don't you do
sincerely
that?
desire truth will not be reluctant till they open their positions for investigation and criticism, and will not be annoyed if their opinions and ideas are crossed. God and heaven alone are infallible. And that's from Counsels to Writers and Editors.
Right. So you can see, and there are other passages that are similar. These are more stark than others. But one reading of Ellen White is that she does see truth as being as a dynamic concept that continues on. But there are so many more passages from her that are ingrained in our thinking that give us it gives us a strong impetus to worship the old letter of the law, the letter of Ellen White, rather than take these passages as an indication of something more dynamic. Okay, so let me conclude here by talking about Bob's next move. He is finishing his BS at a Adventist university in the eastern part of the U.S., and he's considering coming to Loma Linda. And that's in large part because of what he has read about Loma Linda through President Dick Hart's position on LGBTQ. So, so Bob, as he considers his next personal educational move, he's increasingly hopeful. That's it for me. Lauren and Chris.
Actually,
Thank you.
Chris.
Thank you. Thank you. That is very wonderful. If you would stop sharing your slides, we will be able to see people in other views. That would be great. Thank you, Jim. And we have a couple of hands, I think, or one anyway. Lauren, you have your hand up first, so get us started with reactions and comments.
Well, my first reaction always is to let you know what's happening next week. And next week we have the return of somebody who promised us. Some of you probably remember this when Dr. Polar from Germany was on a month or two ago. He said, "I woke up this morning and started preparing my class for today, and realized that was about to give you the same class that I gave you before." And we got a good laugh out of it. But he went on to do some different sorts of things using the same set of some of the same material. It was very good. But he said, "I'll come back and do it again," because he likes to obviously limit the number of times he gives to each class. And so he's coming back, and you'll remember that people kept asking him when he was here. They kept saying, "What does soon mean?" When we've said, what the heck does it mean when you say Jesus is coming soon and it's been almost 200 years? And he said, "I've got a whole presentation on that." He said, "I'll be glad to come back again and give that to you." So next week, that's what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about what does it mean for Jesus to come soon. And Dr. Polar is very articulate and one of our favorite teachers here. And we're really looking forward to hearing on this about this from him. Okay, so I'll just leave that at that. Jim, I'm going to make a couple of observations. One is that it surprises me that Dr. Hart is so forthright, and yet it apparently does not transfer over to the biggest church in our denomination, the biggest congregation, the Loma Linda University Church. And it makes me wonder whether we have people in leadership, put it this way, why we don't have more people in leadership who have straightforward courage about this kind of stuff. So that's one of my conversations or observations.
Yeah, and you're not the only one who has wondered about that. And it's even further complicated by the fact that the senior pastor at the university church is a vice president for spiritual affairs for the whole university health organization. But I think I think there are a couple of reasons. One is that Hart has personally told me that he feels that he can in part do what he's done in this regard because it is in the medical field. You know, one's sexual orientation is in the field of health, whereas whereas when it comes to issues of theology, like him not wanting Broomsma to give a presentation on Roman Catholicism there on campus. He he hasn't told me this, but I'm just putting it with that first comment, which he has told me. Um, it's outside of medicine, so that's one thing. And another thing is that I understand he didn't tell me this personally, but he has a dear friend who is non-binary who shared deeply that person's personal experience, and I think that had an effect. And then also when it comes to Randy Roberts, he's his background is chaplaincy, and he is very pastoral and to the whole congregation, and he knows that it is split and on this issue, and if he was too forthright, it would have consequences he doesn't want to see. And so there's no question in my mind, and I've met with with the senior pastor personally, one-on-one, and then my good friend and a friend of some of you, Jerry Winslow, we met with him together, and and things are moving, but they are moving very deliberately.
I always find it interesting, Jim, that when people say we don't want to become more accepting because it might have consequences. What about the 1 in 5 right now that you talked about that are non-binary? Doesn't it have consequences for them? Why are the consequences we fear always the objectors, the stubborn stick in the mud ones? You know what I'm saying? This goes over and over and over again in the church. We can't look at even crazy things like the 1844 judgment because somebody out there who's a traditionalist might get discouraged and just have consequences. The rest of the people can get discouraged and say, "Yeah, this is nutty stuff." But those
Yeah,
traditionalists,
but
we don't
Lauren,
want to offend them.
but Lauren, shouldn't progressives like you and me and those who are a part of this discussion, shouldn't we realize that we are a strict minority in a largely literalist denomination? And
It's
and
true.
yeah, and having,
It's true. And if there's,
you know, and so when you say, can't we think about those that 1 in 5? Well, yes, but what about the fact that 95% of Adventism is in the literalist camp? One of the reasons that I'm so enthusiastic about Ron Lawson's project, about sociologically writing about Adventism going from sect to church, is that if we can move to church status, and if you do some poking online, you'll see that we're generally seen by sociologists of religion as far down that track. But it's a jagged movement, and it's not inevitable. I mean, the Jehovah's Witness folk um, have not progressed like we Adventists have, and so the Mormons have progressed. I think if you look at the sociological literature, they have largely progressed as well. But but I think we're always going to be a majority literalist denomination.
mm,
Hopefully, groups like this will be more accepted, and I think we are. From what Alexander Carpenter tells me and what he's written in Spectrum, the new GC president is more open to Spectrum and Adventists today than his predecessor was.
I'm going to chime in here and just say the risk is too great for pastors and church leaders who step out to To be inclusive, I have seen too many of my pastoral colleagues, including myself. You would have been expected to be silent. Everybody here knows I have a trans daughter. That's one reason Lauren asked me to, be the moderator today. And I'm not going to go into my full story, but I've seen too many pastors no longer pastoring because they stepped out and said, let's include LGBT people. Let's invite them to be, if someone wants to be baptized, let's let them be baptized. I know a pastor who helped a lesbian be baptized, and now he's no longer an Adventist. I know a pastor who was at the churches in Southern California who uh, was basically he had no place to go after that. He's now a chaplain. On and on these stories go. There are many pastors who have LGBT kids who are silent because if they talked, if they said, we ought to be more loving towards these people, their career would be over.
Yeah.
As someone said to me, Chris, they said you can either shut up and continue to minister the love of Jesus Christ to people, or you can speak out and not have the chance to minister Jesus Christ to people. And I thought, no, there's a choice for you.
Well, that's kind of the one I took. I was a pastor for 5 more years after my child came out to me. And then I took my CPE units and finished my chaplaincy, and the Lord gave me a job, and I'm going to retire next year. God gave me a golden parachute, my friends, for my family. I'm still in close relationship with my daughter, and we love her and her partner, her wife, and we use that language because it's now normal. We're 14 years into this, but there are many who just found out that they have gay kids, and they're telling their kids they're an abomination to God. And their kids are like Bob, the mythical Bob in this illustration of Jim today. They don't know what to do. They no longer have a church home, even though they like to eat Big Franks. Marianne,
Thank
let's
you.
bring Marianne into this conversation. Marianne, join us, please.
I'm just fascinated with the dietary references
Well, I
there.
had Big Franks this week, so I'm good.
Don't try barbecuing them. They turn up
We roast them in the open fire.
in a very inedible form.
But Chris, if you were a health reformer in principle, your principles would lead you to lay that aside and eat more healthful food.
Well, we do make our own gluten steaks, so we're halfway there.
I'm old enough to be able to reference this book by that's not going to help much, is it? John Boswell, written in 1980. Wish I could fix that. Called Christianity, Social Tolerance, and Homosexuality, Gay People in Western Europe from the beginning of the Christian era to the 14th century. John Boswell was a historical, a professor of history at Yale when he wrote this. And he says that it wasn't until the 12th or 13th century that any real hostility toward gay people emerged, coincidentally, in keeping with a more xenophobic bias against minorities in general. The latter interpretation was then retroactively imposed onto the Bible, an early church tradition, to give it a hostile veneer. And that brings to mind a conversation I had in the mid 80s with Dr. Jim Cox, who was at the time, I believe, chair of the New Testament department at Andrews. And he said to me personally, if anyone tells you that the Bible condemns homosexuality, tell them to go to Halifax. Theological distinction there. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Marianne. Yeah, I appreciate that Jim didn't necessarily try to parse the clobber passages of the Bible. We've done that before here, and that's worthwhile. But we're really talking about a human being here who's part of a church who wants to have a relationship, and now what do they do? So the plight that they are in.
Yeah, but
Um,
maybe you can inform me about what your consensus was in this class. But and I don't, I'm a more philosophical type. I spent my career teaching in ethics, and it's not that I haven't studied Greek and Hebrew, but I take at sort of face value that what Hayes said in this book I held up that he put out with his son 2 years ago, that they're accurate. They're saying they didn't change their mind on the exegesis of these clobber passages, but they see, they follow Barth in saying the question isn't what the apostles, prophets said. The question is what we should do today in light of what they said. We could look at the ending of, I think it's Romans 1, where Paul makes quite a clear distinction between same-sex relations and homosexual relations, no, heterosexual relations and homosexual relations, and he's for one and against the other. So I mean, I I don't myself. I don't follow. I try not to follow along with um, my Christian companions who want to read their own current um, convictions into the sacred scriptures. I can see them as sacred scriptures that are wrong on certain points from my point of view today, and they're still sacred scriptures because I see God working then and now, and so I really appreciate that distinction that the Hayes team makes. They repeat following Karl Barth, what was done then and what we should do now.
Hi, we have Robert Ramsey next to join our conversation. Welcome, Robert.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. A note to Marianne, I read the Boswell. Of course, I didn't buy it at my Adventist book center. I had to purchase it from the United Church of Canada's bookstore. I think a lot of people discounted it because I believe Boswell was gay himself. So, of course, everything he told was a lie. But I found it a very exhaustive look at the history of the issue. I have a problem with the term sexual orientation. To me, it's part of the problem. Affectional orientation, to me, would be a much better way of terming it. I'm sure many of you people are heterosexual and you're married, and did you just get married for the sex? Maybe you did. But there's so much more involved. You want to have companionship. You want to have a helpmate through life. And so to me, affectional orientation is a better term. Now, those church statements you read, those are just horrendous. Are those on tables of stone in the church manual, or where would those be found? Are they still current today?
In answer to your question, I believe they're current on the website, right, Jim?
I mean, I think you could do a search and find them. I mean, they are statements from the executive committees in those years. The church has not officially changed its position. I think that's the important point. Just where you find them is something else. There is a slick brochure that the North American division came out with, I think it was 3 or 4 years ago, that is, you wouldn't call it pro LGBTQ, but it is the most progressive thing that I have seen in this regard. but I like Robert. I like your idea of the affectional orientation because it suggests exactly what you say, and I I wish you would say that to to kinship. If you know, get their read on things.
I think
Yeah,
I have said it to them on their Facebook page, but not in an official way.
right.
And now you started out talking about Bob, and I heard somebody say a few minutes ago, well, we're talking about one person. No, we're not. If I understood correctly, Bob was married, wasn't he, to a woman?
No, no, no. He's a
Oh, no.
21-year-old
Oh,
who's
okay.
yeah.
Okay, but just going on with those horrible statements, I think those uh, encourage some gay guys to marry women, and we never think of the women. It's using them. It's just they count for nothing. They don't deserve proper affection and sexual love. The guy's going to have to think of a guy when he's making love to her. This is horrendous. This is just a lie, a total lie that he would be living and it would bother him. And the poor woman would be wondering, what's wrong with me? Anyways, I'll leave it there.
Let
Excellent
me
Perfect.
comment.
let me throw something in here. You're asking about those statements. Those statements are all still on the websites. However, the North American division, Jim, you will remember this. Our mutual friend Jerry Winslow was part of a group. Kyoshi Anand was the NAD leader of this group, where they made a statement. This was about 10 years ago, and I remember because I happened to have been attending that NAD meeting. And during that meeting, they did make a statement that they thought was tremendously advanced. They said that, yes, we do recognize that gay people are born that way and they can't change. I do remember that Ted Wilson was sitting in that meeting and it bothered him a great deal. And he rose to his feet to make some objections, which didn't surprise me, really. But the whole group did vote that statement. That was the NAD committee now. That was not the general conference. And in one way, you could say that's a big step forward because nobody in the church has ever even said that. But this was 2015 for Pete's sake, and we're still not being able to admit any more than that. And they went on to say that, well, if a person was celibate, he could do anything. He could be an elder, presumably a pastor, although it didn't say it in so many words. But he couldn't be in a relationship, in a warm and loving relationship with anybody. I just want to put that on the record, and that is the standing principle for the NAD, but for nowhere else.
Yeah, yeah. No,
Well, we
I
had
hear
a
you.
pastor in Europe come out as, I think, bisexual. Bjorn can maybe help us on that one, but he was celibate, and and yet he still lost his job. So don't tell me that that can happen. I haven't seen any proof that that happens.
Well, we have my pastor on here today, Leif Lind,
Yes,
who
I see Leif here. I have met Leif
is
at
a,
the Glendale Church before you retired.
and
Go
I
ahead.
still consider him my pastor, even though he's officially retired. We still get together, and he pastors me when we get together in California. So it has happened. And it was wonderfully productive. Just so you all know, Leif was a fantastic pastor. And to say that, oh, no, he shouldn't have been, it was wrong, it was sin. I'm sorry. No, it's just, that doesn't work for me. Hey, I'm sorry, I'm monopolizing. We need to go on to George.
George, I'm going to ask you to unmute here with this little button. I'm still learning how things work, and please join us. Uh, ask to unmute.
Yeah. I just
There we go.
obeyed you twice.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim, for the presentation. It's a very important issue to be discussed. I see a problem in the whole picture. There's a lot of talk about the problem. The problem, the issue, is not a problem to me. A lot of talk about it. Many pastors involved in making decisions and all that through the years. But those people who have really something to say about it have not been consulted, asked for presentations or for education on the issue. And I'm talking about mental health professionals. I am one of them, retired, clinical psychology retired, but psychologists, psychiatrists, and other, even in neurology, especially neurology, would be very helpful. Those people are left behind or left on the side. It's time for the church to start asking education. The problem with all of these things that we are talking about is like people still believe in the flat earth because the Bible has one verse about it. So flat earth. And the level of ignorance among people about the scientific discoveries from the last let's say 3-4 decades especially. Science has a lot to tell about the structure of the brain, the wiring of the brain. And so those people have to be brought into the dynamic of this discussion. We have at Loma Linda, there's Kirby Oberg. He has a beautiful presentation. I lived in La Sierra for 33 years. I'm in Reno now. And one time he came when Chris was the pastor, and he gave this presentation, and I thought this guy should be every week in a church teaching people so they won't be so ignorant, so stupid, saying things that make no sense. And those talks are still predominant in the church. It's crazy. This is one point, and really quickly, who created everyone? Isn't it God who creates people? So those who do not accept a certain part of God's creation just because they are ignorant, they are offending God. They are rejecting God's creation. And it's none of their business to tell God if they like it or not. Who are they to tell God, I don't like that you created this guy. He is a homosexual. Who are those people? They're very proud people. They should read the lesson this week's lesson. You see, their pride is so big and they're ignorant. They know nothing about the issue. And there's plenty of information there. Sorry for being adamant. I am, because it's infuriating when I see people saying things that they have absolutely no knowledge about it. They are ignorant to the bottom. And they are still there with this, it's like pomp and circumstance, this and this in the Bible, that verse and that. It's all stupidity. It's time to change it, to educate those people. Sorry for taking so much time, but I had to express this. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Thank you so much. I think you're preaching to the choir here, but that's.
But George, maybe Dick Hart at Loma Linda would be as forthright and as early as he was, relatively speaking, on this issue, because there are people like Chris Oberg's husband, Kirby Oberg, who lectures to medical students on this. He's come to the class that I am with at Loma Linda University Church and has given a presentation on these things. And you're right. It is in our DNA, the sort of persons we are when it comes to our the type of other individuals to whom we are attracted affectionately.
I'm going to chime in here with a topic I often don't hear talked about this, but it's wired into Adventism too, and that is the Methodist holiness background. We call people to perfection of lifestyle, and that includes perfection of sexuality, premarital sex, divorce, all these sexual issues of human relationships that are present have to be elevated in the Adventist church to be perfect, to get anywhere. Ed Rife Snyder, I'm clicking your Ask Unmute button and join us.
Thank you. Thank you, Jim, for stimulating this conversation. By the way, a word to George. Being knowledgeable and educational on a subject is generally not a barrier to having an opinion. And lots of people have them, whether they're informed or not. Sometimes you just have to choose. And often you have to choose among murky options. For example, in biblical times, you probably had to choose between Paul's orientation, where it said that nobody is saved by their works, and James' orientation, which is, yeah, no, you got to have the works. You had to choose between dropping the Mosaic law or keeping the Mosaic law and going toward the Christian position that was in the past. So sometimes you just have to choose. And I had a conversation with a friend. He was a union president. He's been retired a little while. And we used to sit on a denominational board together and trade texts during the discussion, which probably wasn't a good thing. And I said, what are the big issues in the church right this minute? And he said, oh, it's the LGBTQ issue. And we discussed that briefly. And I said, well, sometimes you have to choose. And in this case, are we going to choose to hold on to the abomination option, or are we going to choose to be compassionate? His response to me was that, well, I'm not quite ready to let go of the clobber texts. And so he's making a choice. And I think most of the people on this call today would probably have made the choice to go to the compassion route. But most of the church wants to go to the abomination route. And I don't know how we change that. Just leave that question mark hanging in the air.
Well, it's to be changed in part by open discussion like we're having right now, I think, Ed.
Yeah.
And to go back to George's point, to become more educated about these matters, and to be inclusive when it comes to discussions. My good friend Jerry Winslow, whose health is not good at all right now. He would chair committees on this. The one referenced by I think Lauren Yu. He had a committee that had NAD people on it, and he made sure that it had at least one person who was in the LGBTQ plus community. Yes. A neat phrase. Not about us, without us. I think that was it. Because we, as you know, Ed, from long-term denominational work and service, if we can get old white guys who are ordained together, we can rule on anything. We don't have to have people we're talking about be a part of the group discussion, right?
he Jerry actually invited a trans woman to present to that committee, and I think it blew the tender little minds of some of the people there. But he felt it was definitely important for them to hear from a trans woman. And this trans woman happens to be very active in her church up in Idaho, still is. And I was so proud of Gary. I was delighted that he was my acquaintance when I heard that story.
Is it my imagination, or is it true that when a person finds that there's someone in their family who may be somewhere else on the spectrum, so to speak, or when they get to know somebody who may be gay or transgender, that their attitudes start to change? Often, that they finally realize, oh, these are human beings who have a different orientation than I do, but they're still fine human beings. And it seems to me that that happens a lot, that when you get close to somebody, then all of a sudden you have a revelation, shall we say. So maybe what we really need is more intermingling.
I would hope that that's the case, Ed, but I think it depends on the person. The same heat that fires pottery melts butter. And sometimes when a person has a loved one come out, they turn their back on them. They disown them. I'm not paying for your college anymore, young lady. Um, they kick them out of the house. I think the prodigal son should be standard preaching in our church, because there's the older brothers who say these people are not welcome, and there's the father who's already told the child, stop talking, we're going to have a party, put this coat on and come with me. That is my God.
Yeah, well, you won't catch them all, but you'll catch some.
Absolutely. Some people change, and it always causes people to make that decision. Where do they stand on that decision? Reg, we've got you next, please.
Me?
Yeah, I got you unlocked. Yes, please, Reg Lawson.
Oh, good. Thank you. I want you to know how much I appreciate this forum. It's basically my church.
Mhm.
It's a big deal for me, and I try to follow every week. The question I have is an uncomfortable one for me. Is it possible that the writers of the canon, the apostles, the prophets, had a flawed understanding of God's love and inclusiveness?
Um, Greg, I would further your line of reasoning and your implied answer and suggest that it's not just possible that they had a flawed understanding. I believe that today I have a flawed understanding. And so that leads me to say we ought to all be open to the Spirit as the Spirit moves within us, regardless of our culture, be it 2,000 years ago or be it today. We're more nimble. We're less tied to propositions. I'm working now on a paper on the letter and the spirit of Adventism, and I'm very much in one camp rather than the other. But we being the humans that we are with the needs that we have, some of us need more propositional truths than do others. But to go back to your original question, yes, they had an inadequate understanding of the divine spirit. We all have, as I was saying, we all have impaired understandings of the divine spirit, but we, if we're conscientious, we do the best that we can.
But we are not canonized.
Well, that's right, and if you think about it, many Adventist pioneers who fought against a creedal Adventism, they would not be accepted in the current, in most Adventist congregations today.
Yep, I understand. Thanks for your response.
Thank you, Reg, so much. Linda, thank you for joining our conversation today. We're motoring right along here. Want to include as many as we can. Go ahead. I have to ask you to unmute, I think. Okay. Ask to unmute. Are you there?
I am. Thank you. Jim, thank you so much for your presentation. I don't want you to be offended when I say it was surprisingly informative. It was just your approach, I think, more than anything, through the eyes of Bob. And so I very much appreciate that. My question, I have one question. We know from historical experience that the Adventist Church has the ability to make policy decisions of convenience. I understand, and some, you can correct me if I'm mistaken about this, but I understand that I think it was during World War I when the church was being investigated by federal authorities for its rather rabid stance on the role of the United States per the Revelation 13, I think it was, but I think you know what I'm talking about. Nod your head so you know what I'm talking about.
Well, I actually don't, but
really? Yeah. The Seventh-day Adventist Church was approached by the federal government as being conspirators because of our evangelistic meetings and the approach that we take about the role of the United States and the lamb-like beast and all of that. Apparently, we were so vociferous about it at the time that our denomination and some pastors were arrested, were considered conspirators and anti-American. And very quickly, the church moved to kind of ease off of that position to solve that problem. That's just one example of which I am aware. And we also know that apparently the church was able to make a policy decision of convenience when it came to the acceptance of African candidates for baptism, men who were in polygamous marriages.
Mm-hmm.
And as I understand it, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, that I think maybe the initial response was that they were not going to be permitted to be baptized, but then there was an accommodation made, and with some sort of flimsy promise that the men would only have sex with the one wife, that they could be baptized and keep their families intact. My question is, why is the church so adamant about not making a policy decision of convenience here? What is it that makes this just so egregious in the mind of the church? I mean, think about it. The polygamy, if the Adventist Church, part of its opposition about a gay marriage is that marriage is one man and one woman, it's God ordained, then you'd think the polygamy would be equally offensive. So what is it? What is the political backstory here about why this issue is so problematic?
Oh, good question, Linda. And I don't have any better answer to that than I'm sure so many of you would have. I can make a couple of general observations, and that is that as the denomination has grown to now some 24 million around the world, we increasingly are like other large organizations, and it's difficult to move quickly like the pioneers did back in the Sabbath conferences of the 1847, 1848, when the doctrines were being hammered out. And and then when James White, and this is sort of my interpretation, if there's a historian among us who can correct me, let me know. But my sort of pop interpretation is that James White had a journal which I think was ran for about a year, Present Truth, and that was in 1849. And then by 1950, he had started the Advent Review and Sabbath Herald. The Advent Review, it was reviewing the Advent message of 1844, but so the Advent Review and the Sabbath Herald. The Sabbath was the new truth. So we went from an emphasis on the coming, which we were disappointed at in 1844, to present truth, and that was captured in the Advent Review and Sabbath Herald. The Sabbath Herald, that's where the focus was. And if you look at those early publications, I mean, every other article is on the Sabbath. I mean, that's our new thing. Why do I say that? It's to say that we could be nimble back then, but now we protect ourselves. And so we're having these powerful chieftains in Africa coming in. They have their wives. And I mean, and some of you may know more about this than I do, but my sense is that, they want to be here and they want to be a part of the church. They're converted to Adventism. What do they do with their many wives? And I think that if they divorce them, they would become prostitutes. I'm not sure what it is.
Yeah, there was a humanitarian side to that, but it's interesting, because my question was really about the political side of it, and Ed Reifsnyder has posted that he thinks the answer is that the church leadership is more attuned to keeping the large, highly conservative segment of the church happy, and that perhaps is the political focus. And maybe that's true, because I've heard people say that Ted Wilson, for as much as we progressive think we were the only ones pulling him in a direction, was really very much pulled also by people who were even far more conservative than he, if one could imagine such a thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, and also regarding Adventism and the government, I'm very disappointed that there's evidence, I haven't looked into this, but some of you would know more, that we tend to cozy up to powerful dictators in countries around the world when they favor us. Their politics makes no difference if they're our friends. And I think that's morally reprehensible.
Well, thank you for the exchange.
Thank you, Linda, so much. I think there is something driving it that is maybe not yet really articulated or known among us. So, Emmanuel, thank you for being here. We'll ask you to unmute.
Thank you. I would like to make a comment and then ask a question. If my memory serves me well, the first time the church looked at woman ordination, it was 1985 or 1990. After 40 years or so, absolutely nothing happened. How confident you are that something will happen with the subject at hand? Now, my question is, as a pastor, you are a pastor in the church, In the church, there are some members that belong to the LGBTQ population. In the same church, there are some segment of the church membership that oppose the LGBT population. As far as pastoral care is concerned, how the pastor should navigate this water.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Emmanuel, it would, of course, depend on factors such as the knowledge, the skill of the pastor involved, just how controversial is the subject in the congregation. I don't, not knowing more about your situation or the situation that you describe, I wouldn't have too much more to say, because I take seriously the importance of community and recognizing that we're never going to be a perfect community, and that community, staying together as a church, as a church congregation, is important. And that makes me sympathetic to the pastoral leadership in the university church, of which I'm a part, in going slowly, but going in a particular direction. I'm sympathetic to that, as opposed to those who would say, "Hey, we know what's right, don't we? Let's make a 90-degree turn and do what's right, come hell or high water," as we say. That's, our pioneers could do that. They could switch, like I'm seeing James White did, from present truth of let's see, what was it? Yeah, from obsession with the second coming of Christ to the Sabbath, and then coming up with a journal that says, "Hey, they're both. We're going to review the Advent, but we're going to herald the Sabbath." Anyway, it would depend on a number of factors as to just what ought to be done in that pastoral situation that you described.
We're going to get to Lloyd in a moment. Lauren, you wanted to jump in here with something.
Just a reminder again that next week we have Dr. Fuller returning, Rolf Puller. He's going to be talking about the soon coming of Jesus. And so put that on your calendars. I think I should say he's going to be talking about the concept of soon. I don't think he's going to be telling us that Jesus is coming soon, because I think he has a rather more nuanced view of that topic. So we'll see. I wonder if you would mind very much. I have two pastor friends here. One of them is an official pastor, and that's Leif. And the other one is Floyd Painitz, who is not an official pastor, but ministers to people constantly in the LGBTQ community. And Floyd, if you're listening, I hope you are. I have a question that I want to bring to you. And I know I'm putting you on the spot here, and I apologize. But here it is. I hear this all the time when I say to people, I support LGBTQ people, and I want them to be part of my church. I want them to be part of the ministry. And what I always hear, Leif, is, well, they can be. I'm a progressive person. I support them. They just can't be in a relationship because that would be a sin. But as long as they don't have anybody to love them, or they don't love anybody, Usually it comes down to as long as they don't have sex. That's the really important. They can love each other, but they can't have sex. Uh, then we'll permit them to kind of hang around, as long as they don't ever speak up or tell us who they are. Even as long as they don't act gay, then maybe it's okay. And if I say, yeah, but they were born that way, they say, well, there are people who are born criminals too. People who are born to want to kill other people. This just makes me crazy, Leif. I don't even. It just makes me so mad. I don't even know quite how to answer it. So help me out here.
Well, there's no real easy answer to it. I mean, forgive them, Lord, forgive them, for they know not what they do, is maybe one way of looking at it. People who say that kind of thing really don't, they don't know what they're really saying or what they're thinking. Um, we're treated almost like, how does the expression go? Separate but equal, but not. How's the expression go again? Separate but equal. We're not treated equally in the sense that these questions that are asked of us would never be asked of a straight couple, for example. Never.
That's right.
And yet we have personally been asked that question by a pastor in the Adventist church, do you sleep together, and so forth. And the answer is it's really nobody's business, and it's a question of, as we've said here already, it's a question of affection. It's a question of relationship. It's a question of mutual support. That is really the most important part of any relationship.
And that is what Robert said. He said it so beautifully. He said this is a matter of not homosexual sex, but homosexual love and relationship.
Yeah.
And Floyd, if you're listening, you may have stepped away. Raise your hand, and I'm going to ask you to join in on this too. Every pastor has had this response. When you say, I support my friends who are LGBTQ, somebody will say, well, yeah, as long as they're not having sex with anybody. That's sort of the current liberal stance. And I always say, yeah, but why do they have to not be able to love anybody like you get to? Well, because God, then they're right back, in the weeds again. God didn't make us to do that.
And again, to compare our situation with that of serial killers or addicts or whatever, to make them equal, to make that comparison of us with, I don't even understand where it's coming from. But it's a common reaction.
No.
It's a common reaction.
Yeah, I'm sure this is not the first time that you've heard this.
No.
Yeah. I want to, if Floyd isn't responding right now, I'll say something if you don't mind, Lauren.
Absolutely.
Well, and that is, like I have said or implied earlier, most of us, well, all of us, I think, to varying degrees, need concreteness to our faith. I've long thought that very few people can live and thrive in the sort of airy religion that I need. But I think that we have tied the notion of romantic. Let me get my thoughts as clear as I can. We have put so much freight on the act of sexual intercourse that it is out of proportion to the symbol that it should convey. It's interesting that when Jesus was asked by the Pharisaic lawyer what the great commandment is, he said, love to God with all you have and love your neighbor as yourself. And this idea of getting beyond oneself in community with God, with another, is so important that's what Jesus said when asked about the great commandment and the law. And it didn't have anything to do with how that is expressed. But given our need for concreteness, we have put so much freight on the act of sexual intercourse that it's become for some of us too much. And going back to what Robert said about affection rather than sexuality, then I would go beyond just affection to say, let us as individuals who are in the congregation, who are in Adventism, make the decision of how we live our lives in expressing genuine love for the other. Let us have leeway in doing it in ways which are responsible to the community, but allow for considerable individuality. But the important thing is getting beyond narcissistic love, and being in genuine community.
Excellent answer. Thank you.
Well, as you can see, I'm struggling with how to express what I sense more deeply, but that was my best take at the time.
Let's get back to our queue. Lynn, I see you are unmuted. To go ahead.
There's so many thoughts going through my head from this discussion. The ideas that come to my mind are not fully connected, but I'll try to be succinct. First of all, for the record, research in the subject that I teach in marketing shows that people who are homosexual or lesbian are the most loyal customers that you can have if you can get them. They're more educated than the rest of the population, and they are more wealthy than the rest of the population. In my own personal experience, my colleagues, friends, and students who have been turned out to be, I found out later many times, homosexual in their orientation, have been some of the best, some of the most loyal, and some of the most productive in society. So when I think about employees, I would rather have those employees than many of the others. And I don't know if that's a generality, but it's the generality is worth thinking about. That's been my own personal experience. What I don't understand is something that Linda already brought up, the fear that's involved in recognizing the value and the not just the value, but the contributions that this sector of society makes to our community. And again, that's another part of the discussion. The community seems to be torn for some reason. I don't understand the source of the bias against these actions, these people. I don't understand being homosexual. I'm not a homosexual. I don't pretend to understand it, but I see that they are good. They are good. They do good things, and they are good for society. So I have a really difficult time. I can't see that this is such a large issue that we should be making a big deal out of it. Unless, the issue to me is the organization or the community, if you want to call the organization or community, their discrimination against uh, these individuals and making them suffer in ways that I think are not just unfair, but not in the best interest of the group. It's just strange to me. So I asked one question sincerely: what is the big deal, really? Are we afraid? Is the organization afraid of politics? Yes. Is the organization afraid of economic consequences? They won't get enough money because they might, change their position. Yes, I agree. Is the organization afraid of losing other people who? Yeah, I think so, but I wonder if it's more deeply psychologically held. And I'm asking that. Has anybody done any studies about this?
Really good question. I think there is a researcher at Andrews that's doing work, and there are things going on. We have 20 minutes left and 5 hands, so we're going to keep going. Let's see. We want to get to Clarence here. Let's Clarence, join us, please.
Thank you. Thanks. And thanks to the presenter for this very informative and frank presentation. In answer to or reflecting on the question raised by Linda, why is it the church isn't opening up to admit? That was essentially, it seems to me, what she was asking. I think we have a problem here. It's historical, certainly. And frankly, it is a big problem, not only for the church, but for society. I note that I think it's in the US Army or in some other army, I'm not sure which one now, homosexuals weren't accepted. Say if you're homosexual, you can't be a fighting man. So out. So it's a societal problem also. It seems to me, I say it seems, that one of our drawbacks here is simply that the church is stuck on a literal reading of certain passages. I was looking again at what Paul says in Romans chapter 1. When he comes to the end of the chapter, man, he really goes to town on all kinds of, let's say, misbehaviors or not abnormal, of non-regular behaviors. The apostle really lays it out. How can a church read this and say otherwise? That is really a problem for me. How can a church read when the apostle says, since God gave them up, even the men with men, likewise also the men living the natural use of the women and so on. And then even as they did not like to keep God in their knowledge, God gave them up to all, and really he goes to town on it. I think a church reading this has a problem. This was not written in century 21, not in the 20th century even. It was written in the 1st century, but that is taken to be God's word, divine inspiration, a direction given to humanity. How can a church reading this react otherwise? That, to me, is a big problem. I don't have a question.
Yeah, well, but Clarence, were you here when I quoted Karl Barth, the great German-Swiss theologian of the last century, where he made a distinction between what the apostles said, 2,000 years ago, and what we should do today in light of what they said. Do you remember that distinction?
I wasn't there, but I've read a lot of Karl Barth. I can imagine how, in what line or what direction his presentation would take. I don't disagree with it. I simply say I recognize that there is a problem.
There is. And you may not have been here when we were earlier discussing the fact that the great majority of Adventists, 95% are very literalists. They
Exactly.
may hear the words that I used from Karl Barth. They may even understand them, although it would be difficult. But let's say they do understand them, and then as they do, they would reject that because they believe that it's sort of an inerrantist view of the Bible writers. And similarly with Ellen White, it is for good or ill, and I think it is unfortunate. This is Seventh-day Adventism, and you might read the second part of what Lauren is publishing, because what we're talking about today is the first part of it. When it comes to the second part of what I presented to the Adventist scholars last year, it has to do with Africa, because in a couple of years, the majority of the membership, that means what, over 12 million Adventists, are going to be found in the continent of Africa. Most Adventists will be Black, and the culture in most African countries is quite different from what it is in Europe and the United States when it comes to this issue of acceptance of LGBTQ persons. And so this issue is following a literal reading of Romans 1 is not going away anytime soon.
Marianne, let's have you join us quickly, and we want to get to our three other hands, please.
There are many statements here I'd like to comment on, and then I have sort of a question too. But in relation to what Leif has said and others since then, last Sabbath, my spouse broke her hip. And in the week that has transpired, caring for her at home has been a 24/7 job, a pleasure for me. And that the focus of so many churches on genitalia baffles me. The focus of my relationship this week is on taking care of my beloved. That's my comment. My question is here. I think it's interesting to take so many of the questions of the social situation and apply them to the bell curve, particularly where the tails are out here. I'm becoming more convinced all the time that most human endeavor regresses to the mean. And the mean may move a little, but we go back to it. Discussions like this only marginally flavor the next generation of discussions in the church. It's endless. Many of you depend on the church for your salary or your retirement, but the rest of us need to ask, if the church is wrong on this interpretation, how many other interpretations is it wrong on as well? I think we just need to focus on humanity and get off the head of the pin. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
But back to what I was saying about Jesus answering the question, what's the great commandment? And he went to love. And that's something that secular humanists, people leading thinkers who are prominent in all of the religions of the world, and the founders of those religions agree on. That's what, hopefully, if we can revert to the mean, that's the mean that we revert to, rather than these obsessions, as you put it, with genitalia that we use to prop up our fragile egos. But that's the human condition.
Karsten, let's have you join our conversation here. I clicked on you. Go for it.
Thank you for your presentation, Jim. You're also a slow progressive, and the leadership of the church is a slow conservative movement. And sometimes I wonder, isn't it time to quit being slow? If it weren't for Jesus' radicalism, we wouldn't have Christianity. If it weren't for Martin Luther's 95 Theses, we wouldn't have Protestantism. If it weren't for Ellen White and company breaking out of the Methodist Church, we wouldn't have Seventh-day Adventism. And I think there's so many dissonances in the current mainstream view of the church. They've been lying to us over 100 years about the role of Ellen White, putting her on an unjustifiable high pedestal. Their intolerance of women and people of other sexuality and so on. The list is long, we know it all. Does anyone dare to stand up and says, isn't it more important that we are truthful and honest? After my wife passed away 10 years ago, she said, be yourself and live your life. And I've decided to stop mincing my words. I've decided to speak out. And suddenly I have peace in my soul. I'm not a hypocrite anymore. And the community that I live in, they accept that. And I think it's time for a revolution in the church. What do you say, Jim? And I have one more comment after that.
Karsten, I love you, brother. And we've had good conversations over the last few years, you and I. And you're right. I am a progressive, but I'm at peace with myself because I have convinced myself that that's where God would have me. And that's because when it comes to where I am religiously, like I was referring to earlier, I have rather thin air in what I confess absolutely. There are so many things that are relative, and that's okay. But that's not okay for most people. And I want to be more sympathetic to where I believe most people are. And because I recognize my need for community, I want to be accepting of those who need props that I don't need. Does that make any sense to you, Karsten?
It makes a lot of sense. But what about speaking out for truth and honesty and integrity?
Well, I think I just have. But when I was a young pastor in the North Georgia mountains, I had a tri-state district. And incidentally, I understand Ted Wilson and his wife Nancy Vollmer have moved to a part of my my district, Cherokee County, North Carolina. Now, but when I was a when I was a young pastor, I did not speak my questions that I had a recent graduate from our seminary, but I went up to the seminary because of another reason. I was up there. I counseled with esteemed professors like Godfrey Dusterval and Will Alexander, and said, "Hey, I'm preaching more central Christian truths and less Adventist distinctives. I'm uncomfortable with that." They said, "Don't worry, Jim. You're okay. You're okay." but I'm trying to be in being true to myself. I don't need to to underscore for the great majority the questions I have, but that's it's not because I'm not capable of being more direct and bold, but I want to respect those people and the crutches that they're still using that I don't need.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Karsten, I respect your position, but I just hope you respect my slow progressive position too. It's not done out of default. It's a conscious position that I have.
Right. I respect. The biggest problem I have is respecting the conservatives that I don't agree with, and then that comes back as a boomerang. Then I'm being intolerant. Just a final parting thing. Dick Hart, whom we referred to tonight, had a sermon on September 6th as part of a 3-part series of The Last One In at the Pool of Bethesda. And his lead-off sermon had to do with serving the disenfranchised. I would strongly recommend that we all see that. It is hits you right in the gut about what Christianity is all about. I just put a link on the chat to it. And I think we should invite Dick to come in Adventist today. And I think that is probably one of the most powerful sermons I've ever heard. I've heard it 4 times. And tears run down my cheek every time. Also because it was contemporary with an episode I had with my many visits to Loma Linda last year, where I got to see the other side of the tracks, the San Bernardino, in real life. And I'm helping people there now. And let me tell you, that puts your Christianity to a test. So I'd strongly recommend that video and Dick be invited. And I'd recommend you all see it. It's there's no beating around the bush in that sermon.
Wow.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Karsten.
And I second. Dick is not only a very thoughtful person, he also is a good communicator. And I think for Lauren to invite him would be a real blessing to your class.
Thank you. Bjorn, please join us. And then Ed, we're going to wrap things up here.
All right, I'll try to be succinct here. Thank you, Jim. Again, I got through like most of your presentation, and then a theologian friend of mine walked up to me as I was listening to the ATSS, and we started talking. And I confessed to him that I am not convinced either way by the interpretations of the so-called the clobber texts. So, people taking it very literally, and therefore, there's absolutely no space for our gay friends, or the complete rebuttal of, all of this can be explained contextually and in our current context. So I am not 100% convinced either way. I have to be honest. What I am convinced of is that, or what I feel better about is taking a pastoral path forward. No, we don't know for sure, and we probably won't know what God thinks about this. But how are we treating our brothers and sisters that are dealing with things that are not the Adventist standard in other areas? Divorced people, etc. I mean, we find ways in loving churches to be patient, to be understanding, to understand these are great people that are living in difficult circumstances, and we welcome them into God's family. Can that just be the approach? I mean, if we're not going to change our theology, at least change how we apply it. Would that be a way forward? That would kind of be practical and like you said, respect the majority of people out there in Adventist land.
Well, two points, Bjorn. Your second point, your pastoral advice is well taken. I think that is surely the way to go. But then back to the first point about the clobber texts, you might I think it's in the article that's that's on the website where I quote Karl Barth, who made a distinction between what the text says and what we should do today in light of what the text says.
And I found that very, very comforting as a distinction. Yes.
Yeah, but that requires a non-literalism.
Sure.
And I think that although most Adventists will always be in the literalist camp, that's not healthy for situations like confronting the LGBTQ issue.
Agreed. Thank you. I just wanted to put that out there, but I appreciate your response.
And let's go to Ed. Thank you for waiting.
Thank you. So I'm going to suggest the formation of an alternative Seventh-day Adventist church that has all the teachings that, for example, we hear about wanting to have and not wanting to have on forums like this. So it could maybe be called the Seventh-day Fellowship Church to get around the legal branding issue. And then teach most of the acceptable Adventist core teachings, hire a ordained female pastor. I think 1 in about 10 Adventists are affected by today's issue, if you count the extended families, those who have left Adventism and so forth. So there's a fairly high number, I guess, if that's correct. And just create this church with a slightly different name or a non-problematic legal name. Advertise that you're teaching these kind of things. We're avoiding maybe issues around the investigative judgment and the odd other issue that appears on this form. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if a lot of women who were abused and not protected in the church, that's another category, but have left. And a number of other areas where pastors have gotten away with abuse, and just create this really wholesome church with a lot of acceptable Seventh-day Adventist teachings we like. De-emphasize the importance of Ellen White, but teach it for those who like it. And just create this church that we talk about on this forum. Just create it instead of butting our heads. And I forget who referenced the idea that it's been 40 years and still there's no women's ordination or whatever, These things just aren't going to change, especially with the structure that's been in place. It's like the Titanic. Anyways, that's my suggestion.
Thank you, Ed, very much.
Ed, a bold suggestion, and it will take creative persons like Martin Luther, who would bolted out of the Roman Catholic Church. If I had been living in that time, I would have been more like Melanchthon, because I'm rather avant-garde in my private thinking, but because I value community so much, I'm a meliorist there. I'm not the sort to go out and start a new denomination. But I am for, and I'm joined by who's the La Sierra, Gil Valentine. Gil Valentine and I agree that hopefully the Adventist Church will become federalist in the way that it's organized. rather than monolithic, sort of like the Church of England. There are different dioceses, is that national churches that gather every 5 years with the Archbishop of Canterbury. I could see us gathering the African church, the European church, the North American church of Adventism, in Silver Spring every 5 years. But let the different regions of Adventism have their own flavor, and then let congregations like the Glendale City Church that Lynn has been a part of for decades, have their unique character. That's a way of dealing with integrity and cultural regional difference, rather than starting a whole new denomination, just allowing units to have more autonomy.
Perhaps an LGBT regional conference might be in order.
All right.
Yeah,
There
are other
pass it off to
creative
Loris.
ways.
Thank you, Jim, so much for the program today.
Thanks, Jim, and thank you, Chris. We are out of town. I just would say to this idea that Adventism, for the most part, if you look over our denomination, is pretty conservative and pretty literalist. Others have suggested ideas like Ed suggested. However, I just want to say this. This, Jim, is what makes me so angry about people who have the social and institutional capital to stand up and say, this is wrong, let's do this. People like Randy Roberts, who will refuse to do it. Yeah, okay, so he's pastoral and he's got a big church, yet he has the strength of character and the authority that he could stand up and say, this is wrong, let's change this. Why won't the people who are already there, who have that kind of security, stand up and do it? It would make a big difference.
Yeah.
I don't understand it.
I hear you.
Hey, thanks everybody.